The King's Last Will. The great chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with light and pride. Hundreds of alien nobles gathered under the crystal dome of Velnara Prime. Their eyes glowing in strange colors, their laughter sharp and cruel. They had come to hear the final words of the dying alien King Vorthar, the ruler of the Ceylon Empire, a being so powerful that even stars seemed to bow before his name. But today the mighty king lay weak on his golden bed, his breathing heavy, his voice faint. He had fought wars that lasted centuries, built empires that touched the edge of the known galaxy, yet now, all the power of his crown meant nothing against time. Beside him stood the royal advisor, trembling, holding the ancient data scroll that contained the king's last will. The council waited, restless and eager, each hoping for something that would increase their power. When the advisor began to read, the chamber fell silent. Every sound seemed to vanish into the deep hum of the air. By decree of His Majesty, King Vorthar of the Ceylon bloodline, the advisor said, his voice shaking, his inheritance shall pass not to the council, not to the generals, not even to his royal cousins, but to his only child, Princess Lyra. A wave of whispers broke across the room. The nobles turned to one another with disbelief. Princess Lyra, the one who had been hidden from sight, the one called cursed, the one whose face was said to be burned by starfire. She had been forgotten for years, locked away from the royal court, unwanted even by her own kind. But then the advisor's voice grew even heavier. The princess shall be protected, guided, and joined in sacred bond to one known as Captain Elias Gray, of the human species. The silence was broken by laughter, cruel and echoing. The nobles could not believe what they had heard. Humans were seen as a young, reckless race, creatures from a distant blue world that barely understood the laws of the stars. A human? Someone shouted. The king has lost his mind. The old king raised a trembling hand, his golden eyes burning faintly. You mock what you do not understand, he whispered. His voice carried through the chamber like thunder rolling through mountains. That human saved me when none of you dared. He walked into the fire of the void serpents and carried me home. He did not ask for gold or power, only peace. The council fell silent, but smirk still remained on many faces. They could not see beyond their pride, could not imagine that a simple human could hold honor greater than an emperor. Moments later, the doors of the chamber opened with a low hiss. A figure stepped in, tall and broad, wearing the worn armor of Earth's last defense corps. His face bore scars, his eyes calm and sharp like blades of steel. This was Captain Elias Gray, the human named in the king's will. Every alien eye turned toward him, scanning, judging, mocking. The advisor hesitated. Captain Gray, do you understand what has been written? He asked quietly. Do you accept this inheritance, the princess, the oath, and the responsibilities of the Ceylon line? Elias looked around, his boots echoing softly on the marble floor. He saw arrogance, disgust, and disbelief in every alien gaze, but his face did not change. He stood tall and said only 6 words. A promise made must be kept. Gasps filled the chamber. His voice was calm but carried a weight none expected. The king smiled faintly, tears forming in his fading eyes. You have a warrior's heart, the king whispered, and perhaps a soul that will heal what I could not. As the king's heart slowed, the lights of the chamber flickered. A sudden tremor ran through the palace. Ancient energy surged from the royal crystal throne, symbols glowing across the walls. It was as if the universe itself had accepted the will. Outside, storms began to swirl across the skies of Velnara, the sound of thunder mixing with distant cries of power. Within that storm, the king breathed his last breath, his final words faint but powerful. Protect her, for she will protect you. The nobles knelt, some out of fear, others out of confusion. The council leader spoke sharply. The will is madness. The human cannot be part of royal blood. But before he could finish, the royal crest burned into the floor, sealing the declaration with the king's life force. It could not be undone. Captain Elias bowed once to the fallen king, then turned toward the council. Your king's word is law, he said softly, and I intend to honor it. Then he walked out through the silent hall, his shadow long beneath the glowing crystal lights. As the doors closed behind him, the council erupted in angry voices, their whispers spreading like fire through the palace. They mocked him again, calling him the fool who married a monster. But none of them noticed the faint pulse of the old king's throne, a heartbeat of something ancient awakening, a sign that the true story had only begun and far away. On the lonely world where the princess lived in exile, the winds whispered a human name for the first time. Elias Gray, the man who would soon change the fate of the universe. The rejected princess. Far away from the shining towers of Velnara Prime, deep within a forgotten moon of the Salen Empire, stood a small palace covered in vines and silence. It was a place no noble ever visited. No servant ever stayed long. The air itself seemed heavy with loneliness. This was the exile home of Princess Lyra Vorthar, the only daughter of the late king, the one the galaxy had learned to mock. Lyra sat near the window of her chamber, watching the silver rain fall over the dying garden. Her reflection stared back at her through the cracked glass, a reflection she hated. Half of her face was burned from the ancient war that killed her mother, the skin marked with faint golden scars that shimmered in light. Her people called it the curse of the starfire, a mark of shame. The council had told her she was unworthy of royal blood, unworthy of love, unworthy even of being seen. She whispered to herself, "Father is gone now, and so is my name." Her voice was soft, breaking like the rain outside. Suddenly, a strange humming sound echoed across the valley. Blue lights appeared in the sky. A ship was descending. It was old, battle-scarred, human in design. The engines coughed like tired beasts before landing on the muddy ground. Lyra stood up quickly, fear running through her. No visitor had come here for years. She grabbed a small weapon, an ancient plasma blade, and stepped outside. Her cloak whipping in the wind, the ship's door opened with a hiss, and out stepped Captain Elias Gray, his armor worn but clean, his eyes calm yet alert. He scanned the surroundings and saw the princess standing near the gate, half hidden beneath the hood of her cloak. "Princess Lyra Vorthar?" he asked in a low, respectful tone. She hesitated, gripping her blade tighter. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking slightly. "I am Elias Gray, a soldier of Earth," he said. "Your father named me your protector." "And your husband?" For a long moment, the only sound was the rain. Then Lyra laughed softly, bitterly. "You came all the way from the stars to mock me?" she asked, "like the rest of them?" Elias didn't move, his expression didn't change. "No," he said simply. "I came because your father trusted me, and because a promise made must be kept." Lyra studied him closely, expecting arrogance, expecting disgust, but there was none, only quiet honesty. She lowered her blade slowly, her heart confused by this human's calmness. "You don't know what you've agreed to," she whispered. "My people believe I am cursed. Anyone who stays with me suffers." "Then I'll suffer," Elias said softly. "But I don't run from promises." For the first time in years, Lyra didn't know what to say. She turned away and walked toward the old palace. "Do what you want," she murmured, "but don't expect welcome here." Over the next few days, the human began repairing the broken systems around her home. He worked from dawn till night, fixing old machines, rebuilding the power lines, planting seeds in the dead garden. He never complained, never asked for reward. Sometimes he would talk to her through the open door, telling small stories about Earth, about blue oceans, green forests, and the sound of rain that smelled like life. Lyra listened quietly from inside, never answering. But her heart began to stir with something she didn't recognize: curiosity, warmth, and fear. One evening, as the twin moons rose above the valley, she stepped outside without her mask for the first time, her face glowing faintly in the silver light. Elias was sitting near the repaired garden, drinking a cup of steaming liquid from a small metal mug. He looked up at her without surprise, without shock, without pity. "You fixed the garden," she said quietly. He nodded. "It needed care." Like everything alive, Lyra looked at him for a long moment, her voice barely a whisper. "You don't fear me?" Elias smiled faintly. "Why would I fear beauty?" Her breath caught. No one had ever said such words to her. She turned away quickly, hiding the tears that filled her eyes. She wanted to shout at him, to call him a liar, but she couldn't, because for the first time she felt seen, not as a curse, not as a monster, but as a person. But peace never lasts long in the galaxy. Far above the lonely moon, in the cold corridors of the Galactic Council, whispers had already begun. Spies reported that the human had reached the princess, that he lived with her, that the king's will was being honored. The nobles were furious, their power was threatened. If the cursed princess gained support, their lies would crumble. "Send the assassins," one of them hissed. "Kill the human first. The girl will follow soon after." And under the silent stars, Black ships began to move invisible to sensors, heading straight for the moon where a human and an alien princess had just started to understand the meaning of trust. Lyra stood on the balcony that night looking up at the stars, a strange feeling stirring in her heart. She didn't know why, but the sky felt heavier, darker, almost like it was holding its breath. Elias joined her quietly, standing beside her without a word. "What do humans see when they look at the stars?" she asked softly. He smiled faintly. "Home," he said. "And sometimes, danger." She turned to him confused. "Danger?" He looked at the sky again, his hand resting on the weapon at his side. "Yes," he said, voice low, "because sometimes the stars stare back, and somewhere beyond the dark horizon, the assassin ships entered the moon's orbit, silent and deadly, ready to strike before dawn. The next chapter of their fate was already written in the stars, waiting for blood and fire to wake it. The assassin's moon. The night on Velnara's forgotten moon was too still. Even the silver rain had stopped falling. The twin moons hung above like two cold eyes watching from heaven. Lyra felt uneasy as she looked out across the dark valley. Something in the air had changed. A silence too deep, a calm too heavy, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Inside the old palace, the soft hum of human technology mixed with the faint crackle of Kellen power lines that Elias had restored. He sat by a small fire in the courtyard, cleaning his blade, every move precise and slow, his instincts whispering that something was wrong. He had survived too many wars to ignore that feeling. From her chamber balcony, Lyra watched him, the light of the fire reflected in his eyes, steady and alert. He looked like a soldier who never truly rested. She wanted to ask what haunted him, but before she could, a sudden flicker passed through the night sky, like a ripple of shadow cutting through the stars. Elias stood instantly, his weapon drawn. "Inside," he said firmly, his voice low but filled with command. Lyra froze. "What is it?" she asked, fear trembling in her tone. "Trouble," he replied, and before another word could pass, the first explosion tore through the eastern wall. From the smoke emerged figures in dark armor, their bodies wrapped in cloaks that bent the light around them. Assassins from the High Council, trained killers who served no king, only power. Their blades glowed blue. Whispering as they moved, Elias moved like lightning, firing his pulse weapon before the assassins could blink. One fell, but the others spread like shadows. Surrounding the courtyard, Lyra gasped as energy bolts flashed around her. The ground cracked, the walls screamed, "Get back!" Elias shouted, blocking her path as one of the assassins leapt from the roof. The human spun, blocking the strike with his arm guard. Sparks flew as metal clashed with plasma. He countered with brutal precision. Punch, elbow, kick, one movement leading to another. The assassin fell, armor cracking, but there were too many. 6, maybe more, moving like ghosts, their blades slicing the air. Lyra tried to use her weapon, but fear clouded her mind. She wasn't a fighter. Her breath came fast, tears burning her eyes. She had spent her life hiding, not fighting. Elias turned, deflecting a strike that would have cut her in half. The blade tore into his shoulder instead. Blood sprayed across the stone. Lyra screamed, "No!" He gritted his teeth, grabbed the assassin's arm, and twisted it until bone cracked. "Stay down," he growled, his voice full of rage and pain. Then something strange happened. The ground beneath them began to hum, a low vibration that made the air shimmer. The energy in Lyra's veins pulsed wildly. Her eyes began to glow faint gold. The marks on her skin shimmered like molten light. She didn't understand it. But when she saw Elias bleeding on his knees, something inside her snapped. A sound came from her throat, not a scream, but a wave of power, pure and ancient. It exploded outward like a storm. The assassins were thrown back, their armor melting, their screams lost in the roar of unseen energy. The palace walls cracked, the air filled with light for a moment. It felt like the stars themselves had fallen to the moon. When the light faded, the courtyard was quiet again. The assassins were gone, their bodies turned to ash. Only Elias remained, lying still, his breathing shallow, blood soaking the ground beneath him. Lyra ran to him, her hands shaking. "Elias! Please don't leave me," she cried, pressing her glowing hands over his wound. The golden light flowed into him, his breathing steadied slowly, his eyes opened weakly. He looked at her with a faint smile. "Told you," he whispered. "I don't run from promises." Tears streamed down her face. She held him tightly, the world still trembling around them. "Why did you do that?" she asked through her sobs. You almost died. His voice was weak but calm. Because you're worth it. Outside, the remains of the assassins' ships burned in the distance, and in the cold darkness above, the Galactic Council received a silent transmission. Their assassins had failed. The council chambers filled with fear and fury. The princess lives, one of them growled. And the human still breathes, another hissed. Then send the fleets, the High Chancellor said. If one human can survive this, imagine what happens if more arrive back on the moon. Dawn broke slowly. Golden light spreading over the damaged palace. Lyra sat beside Elias watching the sunrise, her heart heavy but burning with a new strength she had never known. She looked at the man who had bled for her, protected her, believed in her when the galaxy had called her cursed. For the first time in her life, Princess Lyra whispered words she had never said before. Maybe my father was right, she said softly. Maybe love really can change fate. Elias opened one eye, smiling faintly despite his pain. Let's hope the universe is ready for that, he murmured, and fell asleep in her arms as the morning light touched his face. In the sky above, the twin moons dimmed, their light fading before the coming storm. For the universe had just felt something it had long forgotten. Hope mixed with defiance, and it would soon learn that both could burn brighter than any sun. The Council's mockery. The news of the failed assassination spread across the galaxy like wildfire, from the cold moons of the Drenari sector to the molten worlds of the Akron Belt. Everyone whispered the same impossible story. The human lived, and the cursed princess fought beside him. The Galactic Council convened in fury, their pride burning hotter than any sun. Inside the colossal Hall of Voices, the 12 most powerful species of the known universe gathered under the ancient banners of their empires. Holographic flames danced between them, displaying images of Elias Grey and Princess Lyra standing together on the ruins of the moon. This is unacceptable, hissed Counselor Vereen of the Krill Dominion, his voice echoing through his metallic mask. The king's will must be undone, the human must be erased. And the girl contained, but the High Chancellor raised his hand, a creature of crystal and smoke, his tone calm and cold. No one erases royal blood without cause. We will summon them. They will stand before the council and answer for this union. On the distant moon, Lyra received the message with trembling hands. The council demanded their presence. Elias stood beside her, his arm still bandaged, his voice calm. So they call us criminals now, he said quietly. What do you want to do? Lyra looked up at the twin moons, her golden eyes glowing faintly. For years I hid. For years I let them call me cursed, she said, her voice stronger than before. But not this time, she turned to him. We will go. Together. When their ship entered the capital's orbit, the entire city of Velnara Prime seemed to tremble. People gathered in the streets to see the human who dared claim a Sealan princess. Cameras hovered, reporters whispered. The royal palace guards watched with disbelief as the old human ship landed on the sacred platform. The massive doors of the council hall opened. The crowd fell silent. Lyra walked in first, her cloak trailing behind her, her head high, her scars uncovered. Beside her walked Elias, his armor polished but worn, every step echoing like thunder. The nobles sneered, some laughed quietly, others whispered slurs under their breath. To them, this was entertainment, the fall of a royal line wrapped in humiliation. The High Chancellor's eyes glowed as he spoke. Princess Lyra Vorthar, by your father's will you have joined yourself to a being of lesser origin, he said coldly. Do you deny this? Lyra stood straight, her voice calm. No, I do not. And you, human, the Chancellor turned toward Elias. Do you understand what you have done? You have tied yourself to the bloodline of stars, something your species cannot comprehend. You are a soldier of a primitive world, a creature of dust. Elias tilted his head slightly, his expression unreadable. I've been called worse, he said softly. A ripple of murmurs swept through the chamber. Counselor Vereen slammed his clawed hand on the table. Enough mockery. You defy the laws of blood, he shouted. This human must be punished. The chamber's tension grew thick. The guards moved closer, weapons humming faintly. Lyra stepped forward, her anger boiling. My father's word is law, she said sharply. His will was sealed with his life. You cannot undo it, the Chancellor smiled faintly. We can if it threatens the balance, Elias's voice cut through the silence, steady and cold. Balance? He repeated. You mean your control? Every alien head turned toward him. The human's tone had shifted. It wasn't loud, but it carried a strange weight. Like gravity itself had listened. You sit here in your marble thrones talking about order while sending assassins to murder your king's daughter, he said, his eyes sharp as iron. You call yourselves civilized, but I've seen humanity at its worst and still found more honor there than in this room. A hush fell over the chamber. The energy in the air began to shift. The council's monitors flickered. Strange readings appeared. Spikes in local energy density. Gravitational distortion, bioelectric surge, guards, shouted one noble. He's threatening us. But Elias hadn't moved. His calm gaze still locked on them. The tremor in the floor wasn't from him moving. It was from something awakening inside him, an invisible pulse rippling outward, making lights flicker and glass hum. Lyra turned to him in shock. Elias, what's happening? She whispered. He frowned, flexing his hand. Not sure, he said, but it feels old. The alien scientist near the walls panicked as readings went off the scale. This can't be right, one stammered. Human energy output, off the charts. No species should emit this much. The High Chancellor rose from his seat, his calm finally cracking. What are you? He demanded. Elias looked up slowly, his eyes now faintly glowing with pale light. Human, he said simply, just human. The chamber shook, cracks spreading along the marble floor. The alien guards stumbled, their weapons shutting down. The council realized too late. They were standing in the presence of something beyond science, something ancient and boundless. Then just as suddenly, it stopped. The glow faded. The silence returned. Elias exhaled and looked at them. I didn't come to start a war, he said softly. But I won't let you destroy her. The High Chancellor's voice trembled. Not with rage, but with fear. Remove them, he ordered, now. But none of the guards moved, their hands shaking, their instincts screaming not to. The human had awakened something they could not explain. Lyra stepped closer to Elias, her hand brushing his. The moment she touched him, the light in the chamber changed. The golden marks on her skin began to glow again, intertwining with the faint light from his veins. Their energies merged, Selene and human, forming a pulse that resonated across every sensor in the galaxy. The council's crystals shattered, alarms screamed outside. The skies of Velnara turned crimson for a brief moment, as if the universe itself had taken a breath. When the light faded, Elias looked up at the stunned nobles. Tell your empires, he said, voice steady. If you come for her again, humanity will come for you. Then he turned and walked away, the doors closing behind him, leaving the once proud council in silence. High above the city, the storm clouds gathered again, lightning-carved symbols across the sky, symbols from both Earth and Selene history entwined together, ancient and new, a sign that the galaxy's balance had just changed forever. And somewhere deep in the void, fleets began to move, empires began to whisper, and a new legend began to rise. The legend of the human who defied the stars, the rising war. The stars no longer felt silent across the galaxy. Entire systems whispered the same name, Elias Gray, the human who stood before the Galactic Council and lived, the human whose presence shook the energy cores of 1,000 ships. The alien empires tried to bury the news, but truth travels faster than light, and in every colony, every slave camp, every forgotten planet, people began to hope again. The council declared Lyra and Elias traitors, placing a bounty so large that even entire war fleets turned greedy. But there were others who did not see them as criminals, small groups of rebels, scientists, and outcasts who believed that the king's daughter had returned with the blessing of the old gods. They began to reach out in secret, offering ships, food, and loyalty. On a distant, dying planet called Vargan 4, Elias and Lyra built a new base from the wreckage of abandoned mining colonies. Human engineers and alien rebels worked side by side, sparks lighting up the night as new weapons took shape. Every day they trained harder, preparing for the inevitable war. The planet was rough. Storms howled across endless plains. Lightning carved the horizon, yet it was alive with the sound of creation. Elias stood over a group of human technicians who were fitting old Selene energy cores into human-made frames. How long until the first fleet is ready? He asked, wiping sweat from his brow. 3 weeks. Maybe less, replied an engineer named Mara, a young woman from Earth's lunar colonies. But if the council sends even half their fleet, we'll need something more than ships. Elias nodded, his gaze turning to the horizon where Lyra was training with a group of Cylon warriors. Her energy glowed softly around her hands, guiding the others in how to merge human tactics with Cylon resonance. She moved with grace and fire, the wind catching her hair like threads of gold. When she saw him watching, she smiled faintly. "You should rest," she said softly when he approached. "I'll rest when the universe stops trying to kill us," he replied with a grin. Lyra shook her head. "You sound like my father," she said, her voice softening. "Always thinking of others before yourself." He laughed quietly. "And you sound like the hope he left behind." That night, as the wind roared outside the base, Elias studied star maps with his officers, lines and red dots showing enemy patrols closing in. "They're surrounding us," said Mara grimly. 5 fleets converging from the northern rim. Elias leaned over the table, his eyes tracing the routes. "No," he said slowly. "They're not surrounding, they're herding. Trying to push us toward the Epsilon sector?" Lyra frowned. "Why there?" "Because that's where Earth's old colony ships vanished," Elias said. "There's something there they don't want us to find." A sudden tremor ran through the base. Alarm screamed, the control tower shouted. Multiple warp signatures detected. "Incoming Council fleet." Outside, the sky ignited with fire. Hundreds of alien ships cutting through the clouds, their engines glowing red. "So it begins," Elias muttered, grabbing his rifle. "Get everyone to the defense lines." The rebels rushed to their stations. Old guns roared to life, shield towers hummed, and energy cannons rose from the sand. Lyra stood beside him on the command platform, her golden aura flickering like lightning. "You don't have to fight every battle alone," she said firmly. Placing her hand on his arm, he looked at her, a faint smile touching his lips. "Maybe not," he said, "but if this one goes wrong, make sure they live." The first wave of ships opened fire. Explosions tore across the desert. Flames painted the night sky red. Elias barked orders through the comm. "Group Delta, flank left. Alpha, target their power cores." For a moment it seemed hopeless, too many enemies, too much fire. But then a deep rumble shook the ground. One of the human engineers shouted, "It's ready." "We finished it." From beneath the sands a massive shadow rose, metal grinding against stone, dust exploding outward as a colossal warship emerged, its hull bearing the markings of both Earth and Cylon heritage, its name etched in bright silver. Resolute, Elias stared in disbelief. "You actually built it," he whispered. "Not built," Mara said, smiling proudly. "Awakened. It was buried here long before we came." The Resolute lifted into the sky, its cannons glowing blue, a hybrid of human engineering and Cylon power. When it fired its first shot, the beam cut through an entire fleet, splitting ships in half. The sky lit up with the fire of collapsing metal. The rebels cheered, their spirits rising. Lyra's voice echoed across every channel. "To every world that has been silenced, to every heart that has been broken, we rise." The tide turned. Alien ships retreated. The sand below glowed with victory fire. When the last enemy ship vanished into hyperspace, silence fell again. Only the crackle of wreckage filled the air. Elias stood beside Lyra, looking up at the burning sky. "They'll come back," he said quietly. With more, she nodded, her hand brushing his. "Then we'll be ready," she said. Together, above them the stars shifted, constellations forming strange patterns. Whispers carried across the void. The human and the princess had begun a war the galaxy would never forget. And far away on the dark throne of the High Council, the Chancellor stared at the glowing map of rebel victories, his voice cold as he whispered to his generals, "Summon every empire, every weapon, every god that still breathes in the void. If the human wants war, then we'll give him one." In that moment, the galaxy itself seemed to lean forward, as if eager to witness the clash of love and destruction that was about to begin. The fall of the Empire. The stars above Vargenforcer were burning red. War had come at last. Entire constellations shimmered with the arrival of the alien fleets, ships from every empire, krill destroyers, foreign dreadnoughts, Drenari cruisers, all united under one command. The High Council's vengeance, their mission was simple. Erase the human and the princess, end the rebellion, and bury their legend forever. In the command hall of the human Cylon base, alarms screamed. Holograms flickered with hundreds of red signals filling the sky. Mara looked up from her console, her voice trembling. "They've brought everything, Elias, the entire Council armada." Elias stood at the front of the bridge, his armor sealed, His eyes locked on the stars behind him. Soldiers and engineers moved like a single living machine. No panic, only resolve. Then today, he said quietly, they'll learn what happens when you corner humanity. Outside, the ground shook as the Resolute, their hybrid warship, rose from the dust once more, its silver hull glowing with Cylon runes and human ironwork. Beside it, smaller ships powered by captured cores formed ranks, a fleet born of two worlds that had never meant to meet. Now bound by love, Lyra entered the hall wearing the royal armor of her father, gold veins running through black crystal, her golden eyes blazing with energy. When she looked at Elias, he felt his heart steady. They think we're outnumbered, she said softly. Let's prove them right and still win. He smiled faintly. That sounds like a human plan. The first wave struck. The sky tore open with explosions. Streaks of blue and red energy cut across the atmosphere. The Resolute fired its cannons, sending columns of light through the darkness. Entire fleets shattered under its precision. But more ships came, wave after wave. Mara shouted over the comms, "Shields failing. We can't hold this forever." Elias gripped the rail, his mind racing, his soldier's instincts calculating paths and patterns. But no strategy could outlast a storm of 1,000 suns. He turned to Lyra. "If we fall here, they'll burn every world that stood with us." Lyra stepped closer, her voice calm even amid the chaos. "Then let's end it." Before he could reply, the walls trembled again. A blast from orbit shook the planet's surface. Dust clouds rose high into the stratosphere from space. The Council's flagship descended, a colossal structure of living metal known as the Celestial Crown. The same ship where her father once ruled, now turned against his daughter inside that ship. The High Chancellor watched with cold amusement. "They thought love could challenge the stars," he murmured. "Let them die holding hands down below." Elias and Lyra stood on the open platform of the fortress, wind whipping around them, fire painting the sky. She looked at him and whispered, "There's something my father once told me. Before the council hid me away, what was it?" he asked, loading his rifle. She looked toward the horizon, her eyes glowing brighter with every heartbeat. "He said love and power are the same thing, but only one of them creates life." Before he could answer, she stepped forward, energy swirling around her, her golden aura expanding until the air itself shimmered. "Lyra," Elias shouted, "what are you doing?" "Ending the war," she said, her voice echoing through the storm. "But I need your strength, not your sword." He moved beside her without hesitation, placing his hand over hers. Their energies touched again, human bioelectric power and Cylon resonance merging, forming a current that grew brighter and louder. Every ship in orbit suddenly detected a spike, unreadable and infinite. The High Chancellor leaned forward, eyes widening. "Impossible, that's not fusion. He never finished because the light erupted. A blinding wave of pure energy shooting from the planet's surface into space. Every council ship caught in its path simply dissolved, turned into dust and light. No weapon, no shield, no armor could resist the purity of that force from the ground. It looked like the dawn of a new star from orbit. It looked like the death of an empire. When the light faded, silence fell, no engines, no radio, no orders. The mighty fleets of the council were gone. Only drifting ash and quiet debris surrounded the planet. The High Chancellor's throne ship cracked in two. Its last signal a simple phrase, "The human is not mortal." Back on the surface, Elias fell to one knee, his body weak, his armor cracked but alive. Lyra knelt beside him, exhausted but smiling, her energy flickering softly around them. "It's over," she whispered. Elias looked up at the sky, at the endless field of stars that now seemed brighter, cleaner, free. "No," he said slowly. "It's just beginning." He stood looking at her with quiet awe. "You destroyed their armies without hate." She smiled faintly, tears glistening in her eyes. "Because you taught me how." In the days that followed, messages poured in from across the galaxy. Worlds long enslaved by the Council declared freedom. Fleets disbanded, empires crumbled. But no one knew what had truly happened on Vargan 4. They only spoke of a light that burned away tyranny, and a pair of souls who stood at its heart. Some called them gods, others called them fools. But every being in the galaxy felt something they had forgotten. Hope. And far beyond the ruins, deep in the void, the dormant machines of Earth stirred again, old war codes flashing alive after centuries of silence. Because somewhere, somehow humanity had been watching, waiting, and now that their soldier had made the galaxy tremble, they were ready to answer. The age of the council was over. The age of humanity and Selene unity had begun. The universe learned the war was over, but the silence that followed felt heavier than the thunder that had once torn the sky. Across the galaxy, the fires of rebellion dimmed. The fleets that had once sworn loyalty to the Galactic Council now drifted powerless among the stars. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the universe was quiet. On Vargan 4, the world that had been nothing but dust and ruin was now alive. New cities shimmered beneath twin suns, built from both human steel and Selene crystal. Hybrid towers rose like silver spears wrapped in light. And everywhere, the air hummed with a new kind of energy. Peace. From the balcony of the rebuilt fortress, Elias Gray stood overlooking the valley. The once barren land now covered in green fields and flowing rivers. He wore no armor now, only a plain jacket and a faint scar along his temple. His eyes were softer, but his stance still carried the quiet strength of a soldier who had seen the worst and survived. Beside him stood Lyra, radiant in a gown of white and gold. Her once scarred face healed, not by magic but by time and acceptance. Her golden eyes glowed gently as she looked at the horizon. "They said peace was impossible," she whispered, "that the galaxy would always need rulers." "Chains and blood," Elias smiled faintly. "They said a lot of things," he replied, "most of them wrong." She laughed softly, a sound like wind through the morning light. "Do you ever miss the war?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "No, but I remember it. Not for the fight, but for what it taught us." "And what did it teach?" she asked, her eyes curious. He looked at her, the twin suns reflected in his eyes. "That love isn't weakness," he said. "It's the only thing worth fighting for." The sound of laughter echoed below as children, human and alien, ran through the gardens of the new capital, their small voices mingling like music. Teachers told them stories of the old world, of a time when fear ruled, and how a human soldier and a forgotten princess changed it all. In every world that had once bowed to the council, statues were being built. Not of kings or conquerors, but of two figures standing side by side. One human, one Selene, no crowns, no weapons, only joined hands. Their story became the foundation of a new era, the era of one sky, but even peace had its shadows. In the depths of the old council ruins, the surviving High Chancellor watched from the darkness, his crystal body cracked but alive. "They think the universe can live on hope," he muttered. "Fools, love fades. Fear endures." His voice slithered through the empty halls. "And fear will rise again." Back on Vargan 4, Lyra sensed it. Her powers had grown since the final battle. Now she could feel the pulse of the cosmos itself, the trembling balance between creation and destruction. She turned to Elias. "The council's last shadow still lives," she said softly. "Somewhere out there something watches us." Elias nodded slowly. "Then we'll watch back," he said. "Peace doesn't mean we stop defending it." She smiled, her hand finding his. "I didn't marry a soldier," she said softly. "I married a guardian," he grinned. Same difference. As night fell, the twin moons rose over the new city, their light glowing across the silver towers. People gathered in the plaza below for the ceremony of light, a celebration of unity held every year since the war ended. This time, Elias and Lyra stood on the high platform before thousands. Lyra raised her hands, golden energy flowed around her, forming patterns in the sky, the symbols of every species that had joined the alliance. One by one they merged into a single glowing sigil, the mark of one sky, a promise that no world would ever stand alone again. When she finished, she turned to Elias. "Say something," she whispered. He looked at the crowd, thousands of faces staring up at him, human, Kellen, Drenari, even species that had once called him primitive. He took a deep breath and spoke, his voice steady, carrying through the entire city. "When the king died, I was given something I didn't deserve," he began. "A chance to protect someone I didn't know. I thought it was just a duty, a promise to keep, but it became something far greater. It became a reason to live." He looked at Lyra, his voice softening. "We didn't win this war because of weapons or ships or strategy. We won because we remembered what the council forgot. Compassion, loyalty, love." He paused. "And if the universe ever forgets again, let it remember this night, this light, and this promise." The crowd erupted in cheers, the sky filled with waves of golden energy. The twin moons reflected on the rivers below, And in that moment, the entire galaxy seemed to breathe together, united not by fear or power, but by hope. Later that night, when the crowds had gone and the stars were bright, Elias and Lyra walked through the quiet gardens. Hand in hand, no guards, no titles, just two souls who had endured everything. Lyra stopped near the edge of the terrace, looking at the stars. "Do you think they'll ever forget us?" she asked softly. Elias looked up, the constellations shifting like ancient storytellers whispering their names. "No," he said, "because we didn't change the universe by ruling it. We changed it by loving it." She smiled, leaning her head against his shoulder. "Then maybe that's enough." The wind carried their laughter through the night up into the sky, and across the endless stars, and somewhere, far beyond the edge of the known galaxy, a voice whispered through the cosmos, the voice of an old king long gone. Proud and gentle, "My daughter found her heart, and the universe found its soul. That was the day the universe learned what love could do.